In later webinars we'll look at expanding upon that, looking at some of the key players in the industry, and also a little bit about how you might implement it for your business. We'll give a couple more minutes just for any other attendees to arrive, and then we'll start properly. If at any point during this you have any questions, please feel free to ask. There'll be a formal Q&A session at the end of the session, whereby myself and our other panelists will answer any questions you have. We may also run a poll during this, asking you a few questions about your thoughts. Right, I think we'll crack on. So the first topic really we're going to cover in this is, what is cloud computing? It's a term that's bandied about quite a lot. We've got a couple of quotes regarding this, both of which give a very slightly different definition on what the concept is. The first one I've got here is, it is a way of delivering IT services to users without the need to buy, install or manage any infrastructure. You're able to get your desktops, applications and services over the internet from any location. The second one we've got here, it delivers computing as a service rather than a product, whereby shared resources, software and information are provided to computers and other devices as a metered service over a network. The key concept here really is the removal of ownership and responsibility for all aspects of your computing experience, and taking those as a hosted service rather than your traditional service where you had it in your office. There could probably be another 5 or 6 different definitions here giving an exact specific, but these are the two we've selected. So this is a big question that a lot of people ask, is where has cloud computing come from? It's something that is very commonly seen now. It's advertised on the telly and it is widely used in IT circles, but where has this sort of growth industry developed from? We're going to discuss a little bit about the history here of some of the components that make up what we now deem as cloud today. Most importantly, and I think a lot of people are quite well aware of this, it's not a new concept. It's something that has been around in one form or another for quite some time. The most important element, and it's something C4L have focused on for a long time within cloud, is the data center environment. We're going to go on and talk a little bit more about the data center environment in a minute. One of the big things really that has made an evolution with the data center environment, but made cloud so important and so utilized, is the resilience that you get with that. We're going to move on and show you a diagram here. Very, very basic diagram here of a data center environment. This model we would use here, whereby a customer would rent both power and space and connectivity within a data center, is a co-location model. The customer would put their own equipment into the data center. They would take advantage of, as we've shown in this, resilient network and dual power feeds to provide them very high uptime and availability in which to house their equipment. And as we can see, we've just bullet pointed those down there. An important aspect with the power to mention is not just receiving dual power, but that it is also backed up by UPS, uninterruptible power supplies, which are then backed onto generators as well. Typically diesel generators, giving customers anywhere between 24 and 48 hours of resilient power in the event there were a major power outage in an area, far higher than anyone would normally expect to have within an office. Also important to mention here, the security aspects that you can expect to get within a data center environment as well. We've listed a few of them down here. This is not an exhaustive list. There are many other things that can be offered in different data centers, but what you can normally expect to have is very, very secure buildings that would feature something along the lines of card access, PIN entry, possibly biometrics, anti-tailgating devices, all of which is going to be recorded by CCTV. A number of data center operators you'd also expect to carry various security accreditations such as ISO 27001, SAS 70, and similar sorts of accreditations, which are going to allow you to run services compliant with those potentially if those are accreditations that you have as well. So we have a look here. This is a continuation of the evolution of where we've got today with some of cloud services. This is very similar to the co-location model, but in this instance the customer doesn't have the responsibility, the ownership of the equipment. We would call this a dedicated server model, whereby the customer not only rents the space within the data center, taking advantage again of the dual power and resilient network and the high security features, but also is taking away the ownership of the equipment. So they will rent a server or a number of servers of a specific spec, thereby giving them just the experience of the computing facility rather than any of the headaches of ownership. Here we're going to also just mention web hosting as well, which sort of introduced the concept of shared hardware, whereby you may have a number of servers, web servers, etc., hosted on a single server. So clients were getting used to the concept of sharing hardware between them, not limited solely to them. So we've discussed not only outsourcing and putting it within a hosted environment, also taking away the burden of ownership, and now talking about sharing architecture as well. And I suppose this is probably the key for a lot of people in really driving what is now known as cloud computing, is the adoption of virtualization on a mass scale by service providers. We've got a very basic diagram here showing the three different layers that we're really looking at here: the hardware, the hypervisor, and then the virtual machines that would sit on top of that. This has allowed an evolution of this. We would sit this within a hosted environment and then give the customer access to n number of virtual machines, as we've sort of mentioned here. And we're going to touch on that a little bit more and how this evolution has now brought it all the way, hopefully on my next slide, a diagram of a resilient cloud, whereby we're taking that concept of the data center environment, we're introducing virtualization within it. You're getting all the advantages of the very high security, the resilient power, the resilient network. You're now also taking advantage of the shared architecture and the nature of virtualization within that to offer a range of benefits. We've listed a few of these sorts of elements here as well. So let's talk a little bit about the application of this. We've got 3 points down here. It's very important, and probably one of the biggest features at the top here is the expansion or contraction of services to meet client requirements. Because this is done within shared architecture using virtual machines, additional machines can be created or got rid of whenever a customer needs. They can be expanded or they can be reduced again to fit this need for clients. So no longer are you linked solely by the need to have a fixed amount of memory or a fixed CPU resource. This can now be expanded or contracted whenever a client needs. So as a project grows or expands, this can move organically with the customer's requirements. We are very briefly going to touch on this, and we'll talk about this more in future webinars. Some of the security and resilience. One of the key things we've really had to look at, and anyone architecting a cloud solution, is making sure that the solution they provide meets the very high resilience within a data center. It's not uncommon for a data center provider to offer 99.9 up to 100% uptime guarantee on the power and the networking within their data center, such is the nature of the very resilient environment it sits. So it's had to make sure that anyone creating a cloud environment tries to mirror this so that you're not reducing that high availability. We'll talk a little bit about some of the elements you can use to architect this kind of resilient cloud solution from a hardware perspective. So we have a look here. We've got a very basic diagram here talking about using either blade servers or shared storage, which we could look at in this model. Where we've got, you can see 3 separate enclosures here. These could be sitting within the same data center. These could be sitting in a geographically diverse data center. It really doesn't matter from a customer's experience perspective. A customer has their allocation, which we've sort of just marked in red there for you, wherever that may happen to reside, and that high availability from having that spread across multiple separate enclosures in multiple locations is a benefit the customer can realize. So again, we're just going to touch very briefly on this. This is something we're going to look at in a lot more detail in future, but it's something that does come up with a number of people, is talking about the security elements of having shared architecture and shared resources. A lot of people do have concerns about this and do have to look into it quite some detail to see whether it's right for them. We do talk about isolation and separation of computing nodes here. We do talk about separating customers' networking traffic in the same way that it is separated across any network that you might take it from. It doesn't change that we put this into the cloud. Customers' traffic is still separated out onto multiple VLANs, or looking at different methods for doing so. So we're going to touch again on this now. Some of the people who are most likely to benefit from this from a business perspective, which is where we're really going to start looking at this in future webinars as well, is looking at the most obvious one to start with, is project work, whereby if you were doing a small project or you were doing a proof of concept or something in the past, you might have quite large acquisition costs. This can now be got rid of on the cloud, whereby we can offer people short-term contracts, expandable portfolio of resources, or anything that's going to offer flexibility to them to be able to deliver the service in which they want. It's quite common now to be seen in industries such as the media industry, where people go into post-production. They may want to have a large amount of resource for a very short period of time when they finished filming something, which they may not then need for another month or two, which they may need again when they finish filming their next thing. We've touched on that about the ability to expand very rapidly. It's also very important, as we've sort of mentioned with this evolution, where customers have taken their equipment out of their offices and they've also then taken away the responsibility of the ownership of that. The cloud allows you to do that completely, remove all responsibility and headaches of hardware and running all of these systems, and focus solely on what your business does and getting on with doing day-to-day business. And lastly, and this has been very popular in a number of circles, is customers who are looking to do DR, disaster recovery, and it is very popular amongst a lot of people looking to do that. We've seen a number of customers now actually outsource their entire infrastructure into the cloud, taking advantage of having architecture spread across multiple geographic sites. They have an inbuilt DR solution there, rather than having to do what would traditionally be very expensive DR scenarios and setups. So we're just going to round things off now, have a look at some concluding points. We can see how through the course of this, various different elements within hosted and data center environments have allowed us to get to where we are now. It's very easy with hindsight to see why cloud has become so popular and to look back and see where it has been all this time. But 15 years ago, a lot of people would not necessarily have predicted that it would be as prevalent as it is today. And this is partially due to, as we've listed the points down here, its highly resilient nature, particularly the ability to expand and contract services. For a lot of people, the removal of the burden of ownership and the dramatic total cost of ownership savings that people get from the cloud environment. Rounding off once again. So there we go. We've got our final sort of point here. As a result, this can allow businesses to assess their needs in a more dynamic way, which is essential for competitive business now more than ever, given the current economic climate. I mean, you only need to turn on your TV any day of the week and you'll see something about the dire state of the economy. Cloud has really benefited a lot of companies in being able to reduce the cost, not have to go into a large capex spend, and be able to still function in a dynamic, proactive way. I think this is only going to increase over the coming years, and any studies you look at are suggesting this at the moment. Right, I think what we'll do now is we will open this up for any questions. I think we've had a few come in during the course of this. So let me just have a look at what we've had. We've had somebody asking about the ability to span their cloud services across 2 different sites. That's something that commonly comes up with many customers that we speak to, I'm sure it's not just at C4L, I'm sure it's at multiple providers, by having a cloud setup spread across several different sites, customers are able to nominate, if they take services, whether they want it housed primarily at one site or another, and then also set up a replication model whereby all their services and their compute resources replicated from one site to another. So in the event of a major power outage or a terrorist attack where one site were unavailable, they were able still to access all of their data and all their compute resource spread across the multiple sites there. We've just literally had another question. We've had someone asking where our data centers. We've got this spread across a number of data centers. We've got geographical diversity with it, so we've got data center based in Bournemouth and data centers up in the Docklands in London as well, where this is spread. So you've got geographical diversity that would fit into any security accreditation model or insurance documents or anything that people would need to complete with that. Any more questions to go alongside with that? No? Okay. Well, if anyone does want any more information, please feel free to contact me. I'm going to bring up my details now. My name is Simon Tracy, in case you hadn't caught that earlier on. There's my email address. Please feel free to drop me a line or give me a call, and we can put you in contact with our sales team if it's relevant to you, or just answer any questions you've got. It's been a pleasure to have everyone here today. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in future C4L webinars. Thank you.